the historical movement aside, just how do you think of Enlightenment or humanism, and how, though, does it explicitly relate to rationality?
Yeah, it's and I'm glad that you made that distinction because the the book was not intended to be a historical homage
Right.
to a bunch of guys who wrote in the late 18th century, but rather to the as a rubric for certain ideals that were most uh, forcefully articulated in that era. But it's the ideals that I tried to promote. No, those were kind of expressed in the subtitle of the book, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. So it begins with reason. That is, we should figure out the world and our lives and our morality by the application of reason rather than alternatives like revelation, tradition, dogma, intuitive certainty. That science is, I think, just the application of reason to the natural world. Humanism is the moral commitment to human flourishing as the goal of our striving, the moral goal, as opposed to alternatives such as carrying out commandments in scripture, achieving feats of heroic greatness, striving for the dominance or preeminence of a particular race or ethnic group or nation. And finally, progress is the uh, predicted outcome of applying reason and science to human well-being, namely that it should be possible. Namely, we can be um, empowered or energized and reassured that applying reason to human well-being is worthwhile by the fact that when we do it, we can occasionally succeed.
And again, the historical movement aside, because I'm not sure what was happening in this time period, but is one of the at least contemporary principles of enlightenment free speech?
Yeah, I would say so because it is uh, it's an implication of the combination of rationality as an ideal and a recognition of the flaws in human reasoning. Namely, if you want to get closer to the truth, closer to coherence, closer to morally defensible positions, you can't rely on one guy. You can't rely even on one clique. You can't rely on dogma, on brute force, because those are likely to lead us astray. It's only by venturing ideas and evaluating them that we have any hope of approaching or implementing these normative ideals of rationality.
And this, of course, I mean, presupposes that the listeners or even the speakers have this rational faculty endowed in them, and they aren't going to uh, twist words or misinterpret them or spout conspiracy theories and become swayed by them.
Well, and some will, but not all of them all the time. To paraphrase Abraham Lincoln, you can't fool all the people all the time. At least what we hope we can't. Uh, that there are clearly going to be people who are beyond the reach of reason. So when people say, "Well, how are you going to convince a devotee of QAnon that there isn't a cabal of pedophiles in the deep state?" Maybe you can't. It's like the question: how are you going to convince the Pope that Jesus did not rise from the dead and was not the Son of God? Well, the answer is you can't. I mean, you shouldn't try. That's hopeless. But fortunately, not everyone is the Pope. There are people who are at the fringes of or not at the core of these conspiracy communities, who aren't that committed, and they might be open to reason. They're new babies born all the time, and they weren't born with the belief in QAnon or Catholicism or anything else. So there are audiences that are worth trying to persuade, and everyone is, in a sense, committed to reason in that everyone believes their own beliefs are rational. That is, and this is a point made by Thomas Nagel and others, that the case for relativism, subjectivism, is inherently compromised by the fact that a very few proponents of any position, including relativism and subjectivism, are willing to apply it to themselves. Namely, if you say, okay, you are casting doubt on rationality, is what you just said rational? Or there's no such thing as objectivity, and you can say, well, is that statement objective? If it isn't, why should I believe it? And if it is, well, you've just contradicted yourself. So there is, and I think that's not just a gambit. It's not just a kind of a debating trick, but it is there. It does speak to why, I do think over the long run, given free speech, given a community of people committed to the truth, the truth does kind of leak out. We eke it out bit by bit, and that's just because we just can't get away from rationality if we want to be taken seriously, any of us, including proponents of subjectivity and relativism and non-reason.